In soccer, we spend an enormous amount of time talking about talent, how to identify it, how to select it, and how to fast track it. But far less attention is paid to a more fundamental question: who actually gets the opportunity to develop in the first place? In a previous article, we discussed how competition levels shape training environments and long-term player outcomes. Today, we're going one layer deeper by examining the systemic barriers that determine who even enters the development pathway. Talent development does not begin with training. It begins with systems. Economic models, governing bodies, and club structures quietly shape access, exposure, and opportunity long before a player ever steps into a formal development environment. If we do not understand these systems, we end up blaming players for outcomes that were structurally predetermined. At the top of the system sit economic models. In many regions, development is driven by pay-to-play structures. In others, clubs subsidize development through funded pathways. These models directly influence participation rates, demographic representation, and the size of available talent pool. Governing bodies reinforce these dynamics through policy, licensing requirements, and competition structures, often unintentionally amplifying economic barriers. Before talent can be identified, it must first participate. Talent begins participation in schools, community programs, grassroots environments. These are where most players first interact with the game. Socioeconomic status, geography, and access to facilities determine who enters the system and who never does. Talent detection introduces another filter. Some players are exposed through parents and informal networks. Others rely on structured scouting and talent identification programs. These are not neutral processes. They favor players who are already aligned with existing pathways. By the time formal identification begins, the talent pool has already been narrowed. Clubs sit at the center of the development system. They control team structures, roster sizes, coaching appointments, training resources, and advancement criteria. This means clubs do not simply develop talent. They actively shape who remains in the system. At this stage, selection decisions often begin to substitute for development strategy. One of the most significant back-end barriers is early labeling. First team versus second or third team in any given age group. Starter versus non-starter. These labels are often interpreted as indicators of long-term potential, despite overwhelming evidence that development is not linear and is context dependent. The result is predictable: increased dropout rates and loss of developmental potential. This brings us back to competition level and training environments. When players are filtered early, competition level becomes less about readiness and more about survival. Players who adapt to environment advance, and not necessarily those with the greatest long-term capacity to develop. This is how systems quietly select survivors rather than intentionally developing players. Applied sports science cannot stop at measurement. It must inform system design. That means aligning economic models, participation pathways, detection processes, training environments, and selection criteria around long-term development and not short-term performance. Within the Strikes framework, data is not the endpoint. It's a decision-making tool used to intentionally shape environments across time and competition levels. The challenge in soccer is not finding talent. It's creating systems that allow talent to emerge, adapt, and evolve. If we want different outcomes, we need to design different systems. That's the work of applied sports science.